Welcome to this special edition of the Between Breaths podcast. Got a special guest, Bryan Gohl, and he is from Red Light Rising, and he had a number of questions about breathwork. Me and Bryan have got a good relationship going back quite a number of years, and I said, Bryan, you're a science guy like me. You're going to have some good questions, and I know that the questions you're going to ask, everyone else is going through the same process, and so let's ask these rather than just, he sent me WhatsApp message going, no, Jacko, I've got some questions about oxygen advantage. And I was like, let's record it. Let's do it, because you're going to ask these questions just live here and let's talk it through. And I really think people listening along are going to be able to, or watching along, are going to be able to benefit from it. So I do hope you enjoy this conversation, this video. If you're not watching on YouTube, it's on the YouTube channel of me and Bryan Gohl from Red Light Rising, talking about how he can improve his bolt score, integrate breathing exercises into his training, and also like the differences with the Wim Hof method, which is where he started, and just trying to unpick some of that and help with his understanding as to your understanding of the different principles around breathing and how it affects our physiology and how it affects our body and mind. So I hope this is helpful for you. If you haven't yet subscribed, love you to hit subscribe somewhere down below. And yeah, if you're interested in any of the things that we talk about, I'll mention there's some links in the show notes for things like the Red Light Rising website, as well as some of the free breath training exercises, recordings, videos, courses that are available on the probreathwork.com platform, which is where all of my programs, courses, exercises, recordings, meditations, recovery, all the things to do with breathing are. So check out probreathwork.com. So welcome to Between Breaths podcast. This is a little bit of a special feature, I guess. Bryan is a good friend, and we've connected a few times in the past. There are a few different projects, and he is asked me some questions initially around breath training and breath work, having dived into it a little bit. And I said, well, let's record it, because I'm guessing that I literally don't know the questions he's got, but I was like, I bet there'll be hundreds or thousands, or however, there's so many people going to be in the same space where we've like dipped our toe and we've gone, hold on a minute, is it, what about this, when this and that? And so we're going to try and answer these live, and we'll see how we get on. So Bryan, welcome. And first of all, thank you.
No worries, Jacko. Thank you so much. I mean, this just started as a little, like, I literally WhatsApp you. I'm like, hey, I got some questions.
Yeah,
I just started reading the Oxygen Advantage. I want to speak to you.
Yeah, well, I think it's one of those things where, look, I was that guy, and I'm still that guy, like with loads of questions, but equally, like, I came to it with a lot of people know my story about head injury and blah blah blah, but I came to it with a lot of questions, but at the same time, a lot of misconceptions, and a lot of like, oh, meditation is not really for me, so I don't know that breathing can be for me. I don't really do yoga, like, so can it be for me? And like, tried a bit of Wim Hof and sort of like, yeah, stuff. I get there's something's happening here, but I don't. Even though I think Wim Hof's really cool, and I like the cold water stuff, like, I don't want to lie on the floor and just do loads of heavy breathing for half an hour. It didn't feel like an effective use of my time for one. And I think that, so anyway, so I come from that same place. So yeah, let's get into it.
That's exactly where I'm coming from. And it's amazing you said that, because I had a real love-hate relationship with breathing, so I practiced yoga for a long time, and breathing is obviously very important in yoga. So that's when I realized, that's when I started to realize the power of breath, because, in those really difficult postures, when they would say, like, breathe into it, take your breath there, it actually works.
So for me, sorry, I'm just going to, because this is a big one for me, of like, I did not get that for almost like forever, in that, like, and because, and then now, even still now, there's a little bit of me that's like, some people get their knickers in a bit of a twist in sort of breathing, and go, because, anatomically, you can only breathe air into your lungs, like, in terms of where it goes into the lungs, and it's going to go into the blood. But so that notion of like, breathe into that area was very alien to me, and I didn't get it. Whereas, yeah, there's some stuff I've explored over the last couple of years that like you start to go, okay, I know what this means, even if maybe technically the words aren't anatomically correct in that, like you're not breathing into your hip, but like you can feel the diaphragm, you can feel some of the internal organs below, and then depending on what you're doing with, we can go down some rabbit holes potentially, but like why is that helping us to create some space? I think is a really, really interesting concepts and theories, and potentially some ideas that I've got. But yeah, sorry, I'm just jumping in because I think for other people, I'm wondering that they might be at a similar place of breathe into there. Like, what's that mean?
Yeah, it is such a weird thing to say, especially if you haven't done or practiced a lot of yoga, or practiced yoga in a situation where the teacher says that. But since then, like I kind of understood that breathing was super important. And then of course, whatever it was, when Wim Hof burst onto the scene, 5-10 years ago, whatever, I've been dabbling with the Wim Hof breathing a lot because something happens to me, and maybe this happened to you, and maybe this happens to other people, but like when I first start practicing the Wim Hof, like in any given session, the first few breaths is hell. It's hell for me. I get a horrible, like, I can't describe it. It's like it's a massive feeling of frustration, like in my body. Like I actually want to scream while I'm doing this deep breathing.
Right.
And then after a couple of you kind of do, I guess, a round of like 30 deep breaths and then some breath holding. Then the euphoria would kick in for me. And then I would really feel that blissful feeling like, oh my gosh. And then I could do a few more rounds. But there was that initial feeling, and I don't know why, but I hated it. It's just something that just ground at me. But then I started to think of it as this, I must need this. If this is so difficult for me to do, I must need this. But try as I might over the years, I had the Wim Hof app, and I, signed up and did it for a few months, and then fell off for a few months, and, rekindled my relationship with it and carried on doing it. But there's just something that was a sticking point for me. And then, then halfway through this all, you started your breath journey. And obviously I've been following you on social media. So I started seeing you doing it, and holding the nose, and then the Bolt score, and all these things. And I knew you were obviously at that stage doing your Oxygen Advantage trainers course. And I'm led to believe, well, not led to believe, I think you are a master trainer now. Anyway, so I bought the Oxygen Advantage on Audible a year ago, maybe more. And I finally, a couple of weeks ago, I was going through my Audible. I'm like, it's time for this. It's time for me to stop avoiding breath work.
Because have you listened to all of it by now or not?
No. Now I'm actually at the part just before he's going to start talking about a program, how to set up your own program.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'm still I'm still not, I don't know what, obviously what's going to follow. I have a vague idea of the Bolt score and all that. But like you say, it was.
Yeah, Joe, let's cover that. I'm going to come back to some of that stuff around the Wim Hof. Where you're gonna the Bolt score for people effectively is our sensitivity or tolerance to the buildup of carbon dioxide in the body, and the programming we do with the Oxygen Advantage is effectively based off somebody's Bolt score. So depending on how sensitive you are to carbon dioxide, that'll affect your urge to breathe, the size of breath, the speed of your breathing, your ability to hold your breath, the ability to calm your nervous system, the ability to slow down exhales. The ability to be able to breathe well mechanically is going to be partly related to that. And so there'll be different exercises or different levels or progressions of the same exercises, depending on how low or how high someone's Bolt score is. So we try to ensure that the exercises are tailored to the individual. And that's actually a really interesting point, linking back to the Wim Hof method. This is not a criticism or necessarily, I guess it is a comparison. When comparing the Oxygen Advantage with the Wim Hof method, we always need to keep in mind the fact that the Wim Hof method, breathing is just 1/3 of the method. It isn't the entire method. And that with the Oxygen Advantage, it is purely about breathing and nothing else. The Wim Hof method is using the third that is using breathing as a tool to elicit a physiological response, and particularly a stress response. and everything that goes with that. The Oxygen Advantage is teaching us how to breathe, as well as how to use it as a tool in different scenarios for different situations. And by having a measurement of our breathing with the Bolt score, which has been shown in the research to be the best indicator that you can use for someone to dictate whether they're like good or dysfunctional breathing, like the Bolts, that breath hold time has been shown to do that in multiple studies. So this is something I've never really actually, this conversation has helped me to realize something. There's a number of differences. So there's some differences between the two. One big difference is with the Oxygen Advantage, we assess someone's breathing, and then we deliver a certain number of exercises and length of duration and intensity or progression of a certain number of exercises relevant to that assessment, to that Bolt score. Whereas the Wim Hof method, because it's not teaching someone to breathe, there is no assessment. But it's not trying to assess your breathing. It's not even trying to make you better at breathing. I think that's an important thing for people to understand. It's not trying to make you better at breathing. It's not necessarily going to improve your breathing. It might actually exacerbate any dysfunctional breathing that you have got, because you're asking yourself to take big breaths on top of a poor foundation. Anyway, but what it definitely doesn't do, it's not tailored to an individual. It's one size fits all. And this is going to sound like, therefore, I'm like criticizing it or him, which I'm not. Like I love what he does and what he's about and the change he's brought for people. And I've not met him, but I've heard some, people that have met him say the most wonderful things about him. It's just a fact that it is a one size fits all solution. And what you find is that because we are all so different, one thing is never the right thing for everybody. So yeah, that's so it makes me think your thing about Wim Hof with you, the notion, one thing is your personality. You've gone, some people will go, well, it felt so hard and so horrible for me. They would go, well, it can't be for me. Whereas you went, because my body's resisting this so much, I must need it. And that might be true, but also it might not. It might be that actually it isn't what your body needed right then, and so it was like pushing back hard on it. And one thing I did want to ask on it was, were you doing it mouth breathing?
Yeah.
So like if you're traditionally a nasal breather and you've got a good airway, and you don't have any obstruction, and you breathe through the nose when the brain is on sort of automatic. When you go to mouth breathing with no need for it, it can feel really quite like odd, strange, stressful to the body, the brain, and it is literally linked to our stress response. And I think the brain picks up on when it's not matching. So if we did a really hard training session together, we're doing some sandbag carries and I was making you hold your breath or whatever, we're doing some stuff, or we're sprinting, whatever, we're doing something really hard, and you start mouth breathing, that's not like odd, because it's like you need to use that bigger airway to get more air in and out. And we can discuss the differences and why I might nasal breathe to get some benefits. But using the mouth in that scenario isn't that strange, because the body's under stress from training and it's using that airway. Whereas when you're lying on the floor and you go, right, I'm now going to stress the body, that use of the mouth can create quite a bit of feedback, pushback. There's also things like, there's some physical things like the mouth provides no protection to your airway. It's very dry air. There's no moisturing of the air, which will affect like your lungs. It can irritate your airway. So there's a number of reasons why mouth breathing would make us feel, psychologically, there's some stuff linked to mouth breathing and stress response. There's some neurological stuff linked to the nervous system, but then there's also just some stuff where it's not nice for the airway to breathe through the mouth. So for me, I don't think that your body pushing back against that means that you need to do it. It might be that it doesn't want to do it like that. Now, you can do 30 hyperventilation breaths through the nose, and it'd be interesting for you to play about with that if you wanted to. Like I myself I dabbled with some Wim Hof early on in my exploration. I don't do it at all now. I have done a couple of sessions with Jamie Clemens. He does conscious connected breathing. We did a workshop together where I did very much like a functional breathing OA type of part at the beginning of the day. We talked about the science of breathing, and then we went full spectrum all the way to finishing at the end when he took over and took us through some conscious connected breathing, which isn't exactly like the Wim Hof method, but it's a rounds of hyperventilation with some holding of the breath. So it's not a million that they're far more similar than sort of slow nasal quiet breathing. And
it makes total sense what you're saying there about the Wim Hof. Like it's almost, it can be like confusing for the body, because that's another huge aspect of breathing that that a lot of people I think don't know about until you explicitly get taught about it, is that your nervous system really, one of the ways that it tracks how safe the environment is how you're breathing. Because like you say, if you're doing physical exercise or running from a tiger, you're generally going and then your brain, your body knows, Jesus Christ, something must be up. And that's when the cortisol spikes and adrenaline spikes and everything goes crazy. So it makes perfect sense, that had I been lying there breathing through my nose, I might have had a different experience. But then, that's like you said, like Wim Hof is, he's obviously an incredible character, and he's done, a hell of a lot for bringing awareness to the power of the breath and also to the power of the cold. As you know, it's everywhere. Everybody's jumping into an ice bath these days. Everybody's got a little tub at home, and it's fantastic. And I think that's a lot of that, if not all of it, is down to Wim Hof's antics. But it just felt like there was something missing there. Again, it could be my personality that I was like, this doesn't feel like the whole story.
No,
so
but I think it isn't. I think a lot of people have walked your path, and I've been similar in that the it's not like, it's like, I call it like the sexy, like the Wim, it's quite dramatic. You do these big breaths and then you hold your breath for like 2 minutes and you're like, whoa, this feels really like wacky, or I don't know, whatever you're going through, rather than sort of more of a meditation on the airflow in your nose. Is a very different process, and physiologically it's doing very different things as well. But it's not as sexy. And then if you go for something like some strong breath holding with the Oxyvantage without any of the hyperventilation, it's really quite hard, and like psychologically it makes you literally feel like you're suffocating yourself at first. And depending on what your psychological relationship is with that feeling of air hunger or buildup of CO2, as well as what your genuine tolerance of CO2 is like, and your conditioning, you can't hold your breath for very long. And I think that understanding is one thing I have tried to do, is just try to break down some of the scientific principles that can seem a little bit more complicated sometimes, just into very simple, rational ways for people to be able to understand, okay, when I do a breathing exercise, what is it doing physiologically to me? So I can decide right now, do I need that exercise, or do actually I need something else? And I think for me, it's important that people know what they're doing, what it's doing to them, and therefore they can make a better decision as to if it's the right thing for them to do.
Yeah, and the first thing that shocked me about the Oxygen Advantage was how he taught, because I thought that, when I learned about some breathing in yoga, like the big deep breaths, and how in the Oxygen Advantage is actually like, no, that's actually not the best way to breathe. Because if you're taking these big inhalations, you're also got those big exhalations, you're getting rid of too much carbon dioxide, and then that's making you, air hungry, and then you'll have subsequent big breaths, which isn't good. So that's the first thing that stuck to me, was that, the breathe light to breathe right. And am I understanding it correctly?
No, totally. So if I try to explain it, or one part of that I explain like this: if you want to be better at something, You want to be more efficient at something. Ultimately, you're going to do it better, which what does that mean? You don't need to do it as hard or as much. So one thing is, if you're better at breathing, you don't have to do it as big a breath, and you don't have to do as much. And they're two parameters that the brain has got to play with breathing. It's no more complicated than, it's got two things it can change. It can change the speed of your breathing, so like how fast you're breathing, and it can change the size of each of those breaths. It can't do anything else. Okay, we can pause or hold the breath, but they're the two sort of parts of the breathing cycle that the brain modulates, and interestingly, in two different parts of the brain stem, and that's it. And so when we start to understand even just that, and it took me a long time to get to a point where it's like, oh right, it's just that, and when I'm doing this, it means I'm affecting that. It takes a long time to, or it did for me anyway, to just get to that, like, okay, right, the penny dropped. And so there's things within that of go, okay, when you want to try and slow your breathing down, you've got an appreciation that there's, when I'm slowing my breathing down, there's another part of the brainstem that doesn't want things to change. The body never wants anything to change. It doesn't want you to go out on a run. It doesn't want you to go and do anything, really. It just wants you to let's keep everything the same. Like whenever nothing changes, it's like everything's fine. So when you slow down your breathing, it wants to increase the size of your breaths, so that the total amount you're breathing, like in and out in a given minute or a given time period, doesn't change. And it's just little subtle things like that we need to really understand to make the best out of our breathing practices. And I think actually we need to come back to some of this, but going right back to the start is the question of why. Why am I doing a Wim Hof exercise? Or why am I wanting to do something about my breathing? For me, I had a why that was very specific to, I've seen some research that says if you've had a brain injury, your breathing might be affected. I do an assessment, so I'm interested in going, well, I see this link. I do the assessments on my breathing and go, oh yeah, right. It's telling me that actually, yeah, my breathing's terrible, despite me having no idea or no thought or inclination. I did not think that I didn't know that I had a problem with my breathing at all. So then for me, I wanted to improve how I breathed to help with brain health effectively. So it was very sort of specific why. Whereas some other whys for people can be potentially like, well, I haven't really thought about it. I'm just seeing everyone else jump in an ice bath or do some bit of, because if you ask me why do I do the cold, my why for the cold was more like, oh yeah, like it looks pretty cool. Like, I don't know, it was a bit more like that. And we'd used to go in the sea in the cold. Well, we didn't live by the sea, so like anytime we'd see the sea in England, we'd go in it. If it was February or if it was the summer, it didn't matter, we'd just go in it. And if it was really cold, it'd be like, that was cold, and we'd only stay in for 30 seconds. But we used to do it because we'd never by the sea normally. And then when it was like, oh, Wim Hof saying okay, you get loads of benefits from being in the cold, it's like, okay, we quite like that, and I'm quite happy with it. I like the challenge of it, but it wasn't as specific. So I think for a lot of people, their why to start with sort of, well, it looks like everyone's doing like breath work, and breath work's really important. I should probably do some. Or to something very specific of like, I really struggle with anxiety. I'm very stressed. And I've seen some people suggest that some breathing techniques might help with those things. That's why I'm going to do it. And I think that's where it's important to understand why it is that we're doing it. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean,
back to the start, but yeah, that why is important. But interest for you, Bryan, what's the why for it?
Yeah, the why for me was because I was noticing that I was not breathing properly while I was working. So I'd be on the computer like this, and got four 50 tabs open and 4 things I'm doing concurrently. So flipping between tabs, copying and pasting, working email.
Do you want to know how many tabs I've got open right now?
Yeah, it's madness. Yeah. But I started to get a tightness in the in the solar plexus area, and I started to notice it. And I would note, and you know, I take those big deep breaths to try and get that relief, you know, that you know, both the muscle tension relief and just to catch up on my breathing.
Yeah.
And that's why in the last few months I was like, flip, I've got to address this now. You know, I've given up Wim Hof so many times. I've got to, okay, Jacko came to mind. Okay, I've got the oxygen advantage in my library. Now I'm going to start it. And now I was ready because I bought the book however long ago, but I wasn't ready to read it or listen to it. So now I'm ready. So, you know, like I said, I've just finished the first half, and it's, you know, like everything else I've learned on this biohacking thing, you know, whether it was the red light or the cold or the saunas or the strength training or the fasting or the sleeping in a dark room, all those things, like, you know, they seem super cool on Instagram, but for me, until I understand exactly what's happening, it doesn't resonate. And now that I'm understanding the breathing and my own dysfunction and my shortcomings in terms of my breath, now I'm like, I'm hooked. And now I'm like, okay, now I know what's up. I know the direction I'm moving. You know, obviously from my reading so far, it's the BOLT score I'm going to be focusing on, and I want to improve my breathing to reduce stress. I have very little stress, to be fair, but I want to reduce what I have. I want to sleep better. I want to train better. You know, I've been mouth taping for a very, very long time, but I now want to pay more attention to, you know, doing my strength training and seeing if I can increase my BOLT score and how that might affect my strength training.
Cool. Let's we'll definitely dig into that, and we'll do a couple of bits. Let me just say, there's one really good bit that you mentioned that's useful for people and will be good for you as well. That you said that sort of misconception of taking a deep breath and being like, oh no, that's actually not what we're meant to. And when I talked then about we were talking about then efficiency, and I can see you nodding, you were like, okay, yeah, no, that makes sense, doesn't it? That if I'm better at breathing, if I'm more efficient at breathing, I don't have to breathe as fast or as big. The other problem or misconception that comes in is just not understanding deep in terms of what that means. Because taking a deep breath doesn't necessarily mean it's big, or this misconception that taking a big breath is deep, or in that depth is talking about how low down the breath is being initiated from. And I can take a very small but deep breath from my diaphragm, but it moved very small. Or I can take a very big breath that lasts a long time. It starts low down here and fills up. But equally, the typical like deep breath people would often take this to try and relieve some stress of. It's relatively big, but it's not utilizing all the space that you have. So it's potentially not that. And it's definitely not deep because it tends to be a vertical upper chest lifting movement, which isn't working from the diaphragm, drawing air to low down within the lungs. And the reason we want to draw air low down into the lungs with a diaphragm is that's how we're designed to breathe, in that you have the most amount of blood low down within the lungs because of simply due to gravity. But then we have the greatest density of alveoli, which is where the transfer of oxygen takes place from the lungs into blood, at the bottom portion of the lungs. So you think it's like an upside down tree with the branches coming off. There's most of them at the bottom. So when we are just lifting that upper chest, we're not getting oxygen into the right parts of the lungs to be efficient with our breathing. And that's where that efficiency thing to me makes a lot of sense, because if I'm being inefficient with how I'm getting air in, it feeds that cycle of like needing to feel like taking bigger breaths or more of them, or a combination of the both. And then you stay feeling like you need to breathe bigger breaths. And you mentioned something really good, was that that notion of like, when you take a big breath in, a big breath out is always followed. You don't take a big breath in and a small breath out. And the misconception that this actually cements like makes us keeps us in like the lie of the misconception is that I've got a buildup of air hunger. I feel like I need to sigh. I feel like I need to release some tension. What we know now is that it's the levels of carbon dioxide in the blood that's causing those sensations of air hunger. But we think that feeling is related to I need to take a bigger breath. So what happens is I take a bigger breath. And then after a bigger breath, I've took the bigger breath that I thought I needed to take. I then have to take a breath out, which is equally as big. I'm not thinking about the big exhale that I've just done. I'm thinking about the big inhale I did. On the exhale, I dump off a load of CO2 that I don't realize was the problem in the first place. I then feel better. I think what's made me feel better is the big breath in that I did, because that was the sensation I had. And then I stay in that misconception cycle of, well, anytime I feel like that, I'm going to take one of those big sighs. And I'm the same as you. When I understand, I think, you're into the biohacking and you're a science guy like me. So we want to understand something. I think before someone like us is going to fully buy into it. So, you're saying like, I bought the book, I've been teetering, and then like now I'm in, is like, once I understand it, and if it seems like it's based on science and I can rationalize it, okay, I'm in.
Yeah. So what were you saying then? So you were saying that we think it's the big in-breath that we needed, but I feel like there was something else that you might not have shared with us.
So our desire to breathe primarily is in the receptors in the brainstem, the chemoreceptors, so just receptors that are responsive to chemical changes in the brain, are monitoring primarily levels of carbon dioxide and pH of the blood, lesser extent to oxygen. And so when we feel the need to take a big breath in, it's not because oxygen suddenly dropped down low, and I haven't got it with me. You could put a pulse oximeter on and look at it and go, it will be 95 to 99% is normal levels of oxygen. And it will be that. You will feel the urge to breathe in, and it'll be reading 97, 98, or 99. It's like you're almost full. So why are you feeling like you need to breathe in? The other thing, that when you breathe in, 75% of the oxygen you breathe in, you breathe out. You're not bloody using most of it anyway, because the problem isn't the oxygen. You have, as we say, 95 to 99% of your blood, red blood cells, saturated with oxygen at all times. Even when you start exercising at high intensities and that urge to breathe starts to become strong and you feel like you need to get more air in and more oxygen in, your blood oxygen saturations are rarely dropping below 95% still. Rarely. It's because you generate more carbon dioxide when you're exercising and your body has to get rid of it. And at rest, you're still creating carbon dioxide, but just small amounts of it. So like if we did the Bolt score now that we've talked about, which is we just take a normal breath in, a normal breath out, we pinch the nose or just hold the breath, and we would time in seconds how long after we finished a normal breathing cycle to my brain sends a message or urge to commence breathing. And I would breathe in relatively normally, because I'm not using any willpower to hold my breath. I'm trying to get a gauge of it. What's the automatic pause that my brain is happy with after finishing a normal breath out to then wanting to take another breath in? And that tells us during that period that you finished your last exhale, we know what's triggering us to breathe in is primarily carbon dioxide levels in the blood. So the delay in seconds tells us how sensitive we are to that buildup of carbon dioxide, or another way around to put it is how tolerable, or what is our to carbon dioxide, what's our carbon dioxide tolerance. So knowing that it's carbon dioxide that's driving that stimulus, I'm unaware of this and feeling like I need to breathe in. We know scientifically now that is carbon dioxide levels in the blood. It's not that oxygen's low. But I think my misconception is I need to take a big breath in because I need to release some tension. I need to get some more oxygen in. I take the breath in and then I have the breath out. I'm not thinking about the breath out. I'm thinking I've took a nice big breath in. I breathe out. Now I feel better. So I think the breath in has satisfied my air hunger. But what satisfied the air hunger is the exhale that came off the back of the inhale.
So is that sensation that I'm not breathing enough, or that one person is not breathing enough? It's because the carbon dioxide is getting too high in the blood, or getting too low in the blood?
So when carbon dioxide rises within the blood, it makes the blood pH drop. So the blood becomes more acidic. So low pH is more acidic. And it's when it becomes more acidic that the brain goes, let's breathe out some carbon dioxide to get it back to normal. If I'm poor at breathing all the time, my sensitivity to that buildup of carbon dioxide changes. The body adapts and it maladapts. So if I breathe too fast or too big, too often, or a combination of both too often throughout my day, I gradually become more sensitive to carbon dioxide. So then it creates this vicious cycle where...
Which means that even if the carbon dioxide is at the optimal level, it'll seem too much to your maladapted body, and therefore you will sigh more throughout the day.
Yeah.
Is that right?
I mean, it won't be... Your levels of carbon dioxide will have deteriorated, will have reduced.
Okay.
Through your breathing pattern.
Okay. So there's. Is it accurate to say that there's a Goldilocks effect of carbon dioxide? You don't want too much because then you'll be sighing to breathe it out, but you also don't want too little.
No, I don't think it's necessarily that Goldilocks, because someone can work on this is where it just gets I don't want it to... It isn't complicated, so I don't want to say it. There is a bit where there's a difference between us doing nothing, sat at rest, my daily just habits, to there can be too much carbon dioxide if you're training at a super high intensity. And the greater amount of carbon dioxide that you can't tolerate is going to make you want to pant, and too much there is not great. But one of the things that's really important with carbon dioxide is it's the catalyst that allows oxygen to be released more readily from red blood cells, and it's also a vasodilator, so it helps with circulation. So for me, like talking about brain function, like it helps with circulation, it helps with that oxygen being released into your brain as well as all of your tissues. And then from a stress perspective, or anxiety perspective, carbon dioxide calms the conscious centers of the brain. For your biohacking stuff, it's also great for vagal tone. It's also great for balancing blood pressure. It is big misconception is that it's a waste gas just because the body creates it as part of respiration. But actually, the body's very clever. It creates as part of respiration, and it plays this really vital role. So what we ultimately want to do is allow the body to get more comfortable with more carbon dioxide in the body, which means breathing a bit slower and breathing a bit smaller. So I'm not breathing as much out, and more stays in. The body adapts, gets comfortable with it. The chemosensitivity changes, so I don't get triggered to. In a practice, you do want to find that Goldilocks bit, because if you create too much carbon dioxide, like too much of a feeling of air hunger, when you're trying to do the breathing light exercises, you're gonna then have to take like a bigger breath. It's just gonna stump you.
Yes. Okay. All right. Yeah, because that was, I guess my question could have perhaps done with the rephrasing, because that's something I did pick up from the book, is that what you've just said, that carbon dioxide is not all bad. It's not necessarily a waste gas. It's very, very important, because I understood that from the book, that you have to have an adequate level of carbon dioxide in your blood as to release the oxygen.
Yeah.
So if you're sighing too much and letting out too much carbon dioxide, you've then got oxygen that's not being released into the blood, and then obviously you can imagine everything else trickles down from that, where there's not enough oxygen going around.
Yeah.
So that's
circulation is affected because your blood vessels constrict.
Yeah.
And it's not there's oxygen in the blood, but it's not getting to the tissues as easily. So what happens? You're going to feel like you need to breathe more. So there's all these different elements are playing into that, like staying in that poor cycle. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's interesting, because I think that's probably the biggest lesson that people learn when they read the book, is that carbon dioxide is actually your friend, and you need to hang on to a lot of it.
Yeah.
So my Bolt score. So when I heard about the Bolt score, I mean, I haven't done the programming. So I was driving along, and he was talking about the Bolt, and he was like, "Okay, do it right now." So I did it while I was driving, and perhaps not the best, but my Bolt score was 18 seconds.
Okay, well, whilst you're driving, that's not bad, because you want to be completely relaxed and not thinking about the road and whatnot. And we don't recommend holding the breath whilst you are driving anyway. Just
operating heavy machinery.
Yeah, or operating heavy machinery. Yeah.
Okay, and then he continues in the book to say, if you're under 20 seconds, you've got work to do.
Yeah,
you've got work to do.
But you'd be surprised at how many people are less than 20 seconds.
Oh yeah, for sure.
A lot. Yeah, we want to get that Bolt score up to 25 ideally, and certainly above 20. And so what we typically would want people to do for the bolt score is it's different during different levels of stress and during different parts of the day. So what we often say is take it first thing in the morning, before, whilst you're still calm and the day hasn't stressed you out, you haven't had any coffee or anything or food, or you haven't had anything that's going to influence the system. And so you get a marker of like, okay, I've just had a night's sleep. I'm completely on automation during that night's sleep. What is my body doing with the breath? And the best way to tell if that is doing that. Pause after a normal exhale and time in seconds how long it is until you get that first definite desire to breathe in. And that is your bolt score. In Buteyko, they call it the control pause. Or in some of the research studies, they call it the very exciting name of relaxed breath hold after normal exhalation.
Nice. So they didn't even shorten it to a cool,
the same thing.
Cool, cool acronym.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. The other thing that would be good to do for you, Bryan, is have you got a stopwatch? Can you time 30 seconds?
Yeah, I can time 30 seconds.
Time 30 seconds. And during those 30 seconds, so just get ready to do, I'll tell you what you're going to do. You're just going to count your breathing to just get a gauge of our respiratory rate. And when I say our respiratory rate, I mean your respiratory rate.
Okay, and I should do this. So I'm going to set the timer for 30 seconds and you'll tell me when to start.
Yeah, well, so all you're going to do is you're going to, as you breathe in and out, you're just going to count how many breaths you take. So in and out is one breath.
Okay.
And you're just going to count those in 30 seconds. So you can do your timer. Yeah, so just counting in and out is one. And also if you put one hand high on your chest and one hand just below your sternum, just allows you to get a feeling of what's moving within your body as you take those breaths during rest over 30-second period. Try and get a bit of a gauge of how big or how small those breaths feel, as well as which hand is moving.
8 breaths.
Cool. So in 30 seconds, 8 breaths, which then means for a minute, which is what we typically do for our respiratory rate, is 16. Yeah, if you're good at maths, didn't need a calculator. Where we want people is about 10 to 12. Okay. The speed at which someone's breathing is typical of the level of sort of potentially stress the body is under, and it might just be some underlying stress that we're just, job, whatever. Doesn't have to be anything like big in the moment.
So you're saying 10 to 12 for a minute? For
a minute.
Okay. I was going to say, yeah. All right. So yeah, I've got to slow mine down. Yeah.
So if we take, some of it can be just practicing breathing a little bit slower. But remember, when you try to breathe slower, the other part of your brainstem wants you to breathe bigger, and then nothing changes. You won't actually change your chemosensitivity. So as we try to practice, and we'll do a little bit together, I'll guide you through just a breathing slower practice, but trying to gently resist any urge there is to breathe a bigger breath. And then you will see you can make some short-term changes that need to be stacked upon over the long term to make some real change. But to just give you some context, 16 breaths per minute, if we wanted you to be at 10, 16 is actually 60%. Like 16 doesn't sound like a big number, but it's 60% more than 10. And 60% is a big number. And so that is like an inefficiency going on there. Now, visually looking at it didn't look like you were sort of breathing. I don't know if it felt particularly big. It didn't look big. It didn't look like there was much movement from the upper chest. You looked fairly calm, and the movement of the breath didn't look like it was particularly vertical or upper chest, and it didn't look like it was particularly big. Because what we want is our size of our breath and the size of the breath and the speed of our breath to match our metabolic demands. Whilst you're just sat having a chat with me here, metabolic demand is fairly low. So if I'm being inefficient when I'm breathing, I'd see bigger breaths or faster breaths than we don't necessarily need. Yeah. Now, as we'll do a little practice where we'll slow your breathing down, and you're going to feel the urge to breathe a little bit bigger if I keep you breathing slow. And that remind yourself that urge, that sensation of air hunger, we would typically call it, is coming from carbon dioxide, gently building up. Yeah. If we made you do some strong breath holds, which you can try, maybe we do a second call where we do some breath holds with you. And I use these in and we were talking before we came on air, like I use some breath holds during in training, mainly because the more you can integrate some breathing techniques into training sessions and habits that you already do throughout your general day, rather than it being, right, I've got to lie on the floor and do another 30 minutes of an extra thing that I haven't got time to do, it's not going to happen. Whereas if I'm going to do some lunges with my sandbag over one shoulder, getting a bit of like core issues going on, and I'm doing it whilst I'm holding the breath, I'm forcing a load of CO2 to stay in the body whilst I'm working hard. And then one of the benefits I really love about the strong breath holding is when I let go and let myself breathe in, everything in my body wants me just to go and breathe really poorly, mechanically. So I get to practice good breathing mechanics under the stress of feeling really out of breath. There's some other like benefits around hypoxia and hypercapnia, so the low oxygen, the high CO2 that we get in terms of muscle conditioning, increasing red blood cell count, that is a separate conversation. But there is some real simple benefits to that. And it's as simple as going, oh, so what? How do I do that whilst I'm training? It's like, well, in some of your easy warm-up reps, do a normal breath in, a normal breath out, and you hold the breath. That's it. And you give yourself a minute or two recovery between sets as a starting point. And if you typically what we do is people to test the water, you'll have read this in the book, you start with something as simple as, can you hold your breath and walk 10 paces?
Yes.
20 paces, just something very, very simple. But a lot of people don't necessarily go out for a purposeful walk or do that. And it's like, but you might be doing some lunges in your warm-up for your training session, or anything in your training session, you can start to utilize them in. So I'm very much, when I'm coaching with someone, with an individual, with a team, we're trying to integrate all of these things into what they already do, not giving them something extra to do. So let's do a little practice, and it's going to be a breathing light variation that I'll often start people with. The simplest thing to do is to slow down. So there's two things you can do. You can change the speed of your breath or the size of the breath, or both. It's harder to reduce the size of your breath because the buildup of air hunger comes much stronger and much quicker. It's difficult to control. Whereas reducing the speed of your breath is much easier. So slowing down the breath. And one of the really nice things you can focus on is the sound, listening to your own breath. When you make a lot of noise with your breathing, it has to be fast. The way you create noise is vibrations. The way you create vibrations is by, velocity of the air coming in and out. So if I can breathe quietly, you're definitely breathing slowly. And the other thing is, as we start to just practice relaxing into our breathing and into our body, breathing rates can drop by 20% or so, just through trying to just relax, like do a relaxation body scan. But I'll guide you through one. Yeah. Cool. So just get sat comfortably. Don't worry too much about posture or mechanics. Just want us to be a little bit upright, but not rigid. Often when you tell people to like sit up with a straight spine, we lose that natural curvature in the spine. We actually get a bit rigid around our midsection. This is also something you can do for people listening along. You can do this lying down on the floor. It's great to do before bed as a down regulation practice. It's great to do after a training session. I've got some recordings I'll send you. I've got like, on the Pro Breathwork platform, there's some like post-training or pre-bed recordings that you can listen to. So after training, it's a great one to down regulate. Okay. If you're feeling a bit stressed, it's a great way to de-stress. So not rigid in terms of being upright. I want to be relaxed through the stomach because the stomach area needs to be relaxed to allow the rib cage to articulate. I want the jaw to be nice and relaxed, the lips softly together, tongue to the roof of the mouth, but the teeth not touching. And then I want you to think about breathing into the face through the nose rather than breathing up your nose. When we breathe up the nose, it makes the rest of the body move vertically as well. When we breathe into the face, we get this more lateral expansion of the ribs. Okay. So nice and relaxed through the face. Thinking about relaxing, you can close your eyes. You can think about relaxing your forehead. Think about relaxing your cheeks. You can relax your eye sockets, your ears, relaxing the jaw, relax the neck and the throat. Give the shoulders and the neck a little bit of a wiggle to just ensure that they are relaxed. Relax the chest. Just settle into the chair, feeling your bum on the seat. And just initially, just notice your breathing. With the mouth softly closed, teeth not touching, tongue to the roof of the mouth. Just notice where in your body is moving as you just notice the breath coming in and out. And just think about that idea of breathing into the face rather than up the nose. And as you breathe into the face through the nose, notice the lower rib cage gently expanding up and out as the diaphragm goes down and gently out. And as you exhale, everything just comes back together. So just noting that relationship, that synchronization of as you breathe in through the nose into the face, gentle expansion lower down, and as you breathe out, it just gently comes back together. And keep a soft awareness of that movement low down in the rib cage as you place a little more attention on the feeling of the air in your nostrils as you breathe into the face. Feel the airflow in the nostrils on the way in, and just relax on the exhalation. Notice the sound the breath is making on the way in as you feel the air in the nostrils. And then just relax and let go on the way out. As air quietly comes in through the nose on the inhale, there's some gentle work for the ribs and diaphragm to do. But on the exhale, you can just relax and let the natural elasticity of the lungs and the fascial tissue in the diaphragm just come back into place. And as you notice the airflow and the sound of the breath, try to make it quieter as you inhale. Keep relaxing with each exhale. And notice that as you do make it quieter, the breath is becoming slower, and also the movement of the breath is becoming more gentle. And keep relaxing on the exhales. So you should be able to get the breath pretty quiet, if not silent. Just give me a little nod of the head if it's quiet or silent, at least. Yeah, good. Keep that breath then really quiet and silent on the inhales, but on the exhales, we're just going to extend it slightly by humming. So it's quiet breath in, and then a hum. On the way out. As you hum, it naturally extends the exhalation. The vibrations also innervate the vagus nerve, which runs through the voice box. And you're slowing down the whole breathing cycle. But remember, when that inhale naturally comes, resist any urge to breathe bigger or faster. Keep it gentle, small, and quiet on the inhale. So we're not trying to breathe any bigger, but we are slowing down the breath and extending the exhalation. So gentle, small, quiet breath in, good, and humming. On the exhale. With each exhale, as you relax, just see if you can feel like that exhale is just becoming slightly longer than the last one. Good. When the urge to take that inhale comes, just relax into it. Keep it soft, small, gentle, and silent. Resisting the urge to take a bigger breath because you're slowing the breathing down. At the end of the hum, the body might offer you a little bit of a pause. If there is a pause there that the body just wants to do, that's great. Enjoy the stillness of that pause. Nothing's moving during that pause, but don't force it. Don't try to create it. Otherwise it'll affect that urge to breathe on the inhale. Just take a couple more breaths like that. And as you do, at the end of the exhale, just have a little swallow and notice, has there been a buildup of saliva in the mouth as a sign of that relaxation response from the down regulation of the nervous system? When we extend our exhalations, we release a neurotransmitter called acetylcholine, which lowers and slows the heart rate and is parasympathetic, promoting for the nervous system. The saliva in the mouth as a buildup is a sign of that shift towards that relaxation parasympathetic response. Yeah. So if you open your eyes, Bryan, and then just time yourself 30 seconds again, and just count that respiratory rate. Let your body be natural. So don't try to control your breathing now. Let it see if the automation has changed. And if you put your hands as they were before, one on the chest, one just below the sternum, as well as counting the breath naturally, observing it for 30 seconds. Also notice the movement of the hands. Is it any different? Is it any smaller? Is it any lower? As well as just having a gauge on the speed.
That was 5.
Nice. So for a minute, that'd be 10.
Mm-hmm.
So you go from 16 to 10. Now, you don't have to be, the obvious question is like, well, am I going to stay at 10 for the rest of the day? Well, no, because you're going to go back to your like natural chemosensitivity. But 1 minute of good breathing does influence that respiratory center in the brainstem. And so little bits and often you can actually keep yourself in that. You must feel more relaxed now breathing at 10 breaths per minute rather than 6, so rather than 16.
I definitely feel more relaxed, but I did feel there were definitely some moments of air hunger.
Yeah, so that's good. And that's where the Goldilocks analogy comes in. During breathing like that, you want just a little bit of air hunger, not too much that you lose your cycle and have to go. It's not a problem. If you do, you just reset and you go again, just let yourself recover for 20 seconds or so, and then you go again. And actually getting to that point where it's too much is a good thing to find out where too much is. I'm a big fan of like, see where you find your limit and then you can come back for all sorts of things in life. But yeah, so you want to let that air hunger build up a little bit, but it just wants to be gentle. You looked, from watching you do it, you looked nicely in control. You can never tell what's going on in someone's head, and but I could hear you humming, the length of the breath, the fact that it came down to 10 breaths per minute afterwards, all a really good sign. And being able to feel that air hunger, but relaxing into it is where it's at. And I think a big takeaway for you of integrating into your daily life and training is going, you've got 2 ways to work on your BOLT score and your CO2 tolerance. You've got breathing light like that, so trying to breathe less, breathe slower and breathe smaller. And then you've got forcing adaptation. So that's relaxing. Yeah, it can feel you get used to that air hunger a little bit, but it's generally it's relaxing. Your heart rate will have dropped during that as you've slowed your respiratory rate. Forcing adaptation is literally holding the breath whilst doing some sort of exercise. Keep that CO2 in and basically say to the body, deal with all that. And it will get used to it. It's a short amount of time. You might only do that breath hold for 10 seconds, 15 seconds. You'll build up to 30 or more. Whereas the breathing light is a longer sustained period of a little bit of CO2. Whereas the breath holds is like, there you go, bang, there's a load of it in a short amount of time. And the two are both working, one in a relaxed state, one in a upregulating state, stress state. You can do the breath holds in warm-ups for your training. The down regulation, great before bed, great for post-training recovery. You do it in front of your red light, you're starting to stack things up. And then I'm sure there's a few other wacky, crazy things that you potentially do as well. Like do a meditation whilst you do it. I mean, you are meditating on your breath as you do it anyway. But you could add in some other meditation practices that you might do. Yeah, I'm sure there's other. I'm sure there's some other biohacking that you can do whilst you're doing all those things. I don't know.
Yeah.
What other things can you stack on top of that?
Well, see, there's a big sigh. That was the air hunger.
But you've just spent. We just took you for 5 minutes, and we just raised your CO2 levels, and your brain eventually is now gone. Okay, let's just get back to try and get back to normal.
Yeah.
That's totally normal.
Yeah.
After you sigh, after you sigh, just stop and pause. Count to 5. Gradually build up to 10. 5 to 10 second pause. Eventually, 10-second pause after you've sighed, or half your bolt score. You pause for after a sigh. It just you've gone sigh. Got rid of CO2. You go, oh, I noticed that. You pause, then go about the rest of your day, because you're just that pause then offsets that sigh in terms of your CO2. You're always playing this balance where your brain's going like, no, I don't want CO2, and you're going, no, come on, we're going to get used to it. Yeah.
Okay, and then so does the brain eventually adapt to these new levels?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, your brain and your body adapts to flipping everything.
Cool. Awesome. And how would you say this has affected your training in general? You know, have you noticed differences in your strength training? And then obviously you've been doing a lot of ultra running.
Yeah, I mean, I did the running to basically train the breath. If you think that if you're someone like me that didn't previously sort of meditate, would find it hard to sit down and just be still. To work on your breathing when you're sat doing nothing, it's quite difficult, because even if you're dysfunctional with your breathing, when you're sat down doing nothing, it's so small that you don't even know. Go out for a run, particularly something that's quite cyclical like running, immediately the demand for oxygen goes up, you create more CO2, and you can feel your breathing straight away as soon as you start running. And then you can start to go, God, yeah, actually, I'm not running hard, I'm just jogging, but I can feel it all in my upper chest. Well, you will have been upper chest breathing when you were sat down doing nothing at home, but you just didn't know it. You don't go from like beautiful breathing to then suddenly like terrible, but equally, you don't breathe terribly at rest and go to beautiful diaphragmatic breathing when you start training. It's just going to get worse. So I used running as a tool to help me train my breath effectively. Then, really enjoy the process and set some goals and blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden you're running around an island. If you're an idiot like me. So yeah, it's dramatic for recovery, massive for sleep, for cognitive function, like being able to like be productive, a massive brain health things for me, which is obviously like a big proponent of it. But being able to manage stress, being able to quieten the flipping racing mind, loads of that I'm just diving into more and more and more. But training wise, you're training. You're able to just add an additional stimulus to any aspect of your training. You don't have to do a breath. You could just try to take smaller or slower breaths than you want to during a session that you're doing, and you'll feel the difference. There's some interesting stuff which is a whole separate conversation around really work on the mechanics of the breathing and being able to breathe well into like expanding the rib cage, particularly like breathing into the back for a lot of people, for how that affects the shoulder blade position, and then how that influences actually like strengthen some like, you know, potentially over pressing movements and things like that. Like that's been brilliant. You can create, if you've got some issues with your breathing that's potentially influencing your scapular position, you can create some more stability around the shoulder by breathing better. Equally, your diaphragm influences your hip flexors and your spine and your pelvis.
Oh, wow.
So you can influence like core, you can influence in terms of core stabilization, but equally you can influence hip range of motion.
That's so interesting, because I'm actually like, if I zoom out and I look at my overarching goal here, it's been to just be healthier in my body, you know, because I had a lot of, I had crazy back injury, then I had a massive knee injury, and I do have some scapular problems that caused a couple of shoulder injuries, which then caused a wrist injury. So I am actually working on everything you've just said. You know, I'm working on, you know, my toe dexterity to try and improve my knee strength, to try and improve my hip flexors and my lower back, and then my shoulders and all that. So like this breath work now is like a little, it's like a little noddy badge on top of all of that, because all of that stretching and all of that strength will get better once the breathing is better.
Yeah, because if you describe everything that you've just mentioned there, it's got to come out from somewhere. There's one movement pattern that underpins every single other movement pattern you will ever do, and that's breathing. Breathing is a movement pattern. Bones articulate, joints move, muscles contract and relax during breathing. It's a movement pattern, no different to a squat as a movement pattern.
And it's so interesting, that concept as well, that I learned kind of from you guys via that that guy who trains in the circus. What was his name? Do you remember him? You guys spoke to him a couple times.
Yeah. I'm going to forget his name now. It's a bit embarrassing.
Sure,
I hope he doesn't watch this.
Also great.
If my wife hadn't stole my phone, I could have my phone out and I'd get it.
Great guy.
He's a Kiwi.
He's a Kiwi. I wonder.
Yeah.
And let me get it just so that we can give him a shout, because it's
Glenn Stewart. Glenn Stewart. There you go. I got it.
Go. Good man. Look at you. Breathing's kicking in the brain
cognition,
there. Right?
Remembering.
Yeah. So what he said, like, you know, if the core is strong, then the limbs have more range of motion, because you know your brain is confident that it can go behind you and get it back, because the core is strong. And that's so massive that, you know, I wish I would have learned that before I picked up the first dumbbell, you know.
Yeah, I know. Because
then I would have focused on my core instead of, you know, my biceps and my pecs, because I wanted to look tough.
Well, you wouldn't. We'd have still done bicep kills and not worried about that. But that's because just when we're young and stupid.
Exactly.
Right, we'll do another session, right, where I'll do you some, because what you say, it's interesting. You talk about core and stabilizing the core, and then wait till I go to you. Okay, do something really simple like a plank or a dead bug or something, and then we'll go, how do you or how well do you or can you breathe during that position, and it will change all of your core training forever. But that's a separate. We'll do that as a separate session.
I'll need to get through the book first, and then do my little program. I'm sure he's going to teach us a little program in the book.
Yeah,
and hopefully get my bolt score up, and then we can have a part 2.
Yeah, nice.
Awesome, Jacko.
Good stuff, man. Thanks
well, that's
very
it
much.
from me.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
You've been breathing. So is Bryan. I've been Jacko. Until next time. Keep it nasal.